Another edition of Tartar Sauce here in the chilling Peoria Journal-Star. The building's not cold, but the area is. And with me, Craig Moore, the owner, operator of Younger Than Yesterday record store in Peoria. Welcome.
Greetings, and thank you for the invitation.
This is not your first visit to Tartar Sauce, so the folks are going, they're either saying, not him again, or... Oh, great. Craig's back. We will let them decide.
I'm surprised he's invited me back after the last one. We just went completely crazy.
Well, each time we move one step further in technology. And once again, for those of you that are watching on Facebook, the classic CD player is at our side, at Craig's side, and we'll be heard from in this program. Craig, now you've always got many angles. This one... We're flashing back to the basement tapes. Now, for people that aren't familiar, I'm going to let you talk about it more than me because it's something you played a part in. But the basement tapes goes back to, like, I think you've got 1981.
Yeah, they actually did the first one in 1980. But it wasn't as big a deal. You know, it was, that one was so popular, and they had a good time with it. And in '81, then they decided to, sort of do a big deal with it and do an album. And we're
talking about the radio station was WWCT FM.
Which still exists, except back in those days it was 106.
106, and it was, how would you describe the format? Album rock?
Yeah, album-oriented rock.
And I think they took their cue from probably other stations that decided, we got a lot of talent in this area, rock and roll talent. So why don't we give the locals a chance to get on the air?
Yeah, well, I think the station, as we all knew and loved it anyway, I think that sort of took shape around 1977 when I became aware of the station around 78, and they were already, but they were sort of the underground station in Peoria, you know, because it was all young people. They were the Saturday Night Live of rock and roll, as a younger generation. It was a new face to Peoria radio for sure.
And it was, it was something, I guess everything goes through stages or phases, but if you were in a larger markets, you might have heard that format in the late 60s, early 70s. Well, it took a while to get to Peoria.
Yeah, well, WXRT, I think, in Chicago had maybe some influence.
And yeah, I would think so. And in fact, they had... one of the people, a young lady who was...
Wendy Rice.
Wendy Rice, thank you for the name.
That's where she went. When she left here, she went to XRT.
So, yeah, I remember her. She was very good. She always played, you remember people by what they played? Sometimes you do. The song from the Chambers Brothers, there was not Time Has Come Today. It was on that album, but it was another one. I Can't Stand It, I think it was the song.
Okay.
Very good song. Yeah. But she would play that all the time, so I always liked that. Anyway, we're going way back for you people wondering, what are they talking about?
A lot of names, passed through there, that had a great following. Kenny Johnson, Rick Hallberg, who's still in the area, and Jeff Murphy, John Amberg, did I say John? And of course, a name that's been getting a lot of attention for all the wrong reasons recently was a friend of mine and a former partner of mine by the name of Jim Reeves, who had this radio voice that was, everybody really, he may have had, one of the more lasting impressions, that voice of his on the air. He was so good.
Oh yeah, he could probably recite the old business of read off the phone book.
Yeah, read the phone book.
And it would be that's interesting.
It would be interesting. Yes. Oh, Steve Johnson, Larry Johnson. I'll be darned.
And they all live on those different streets.
Yeah,
that's amazing.
Yeah.
No, I remember him, and now let's fill in a little something here. You mentioned the record store. You guys were partners when you first started?
In 1984, I promoted the first record collectors event, a record collectors show in Peoria, and that was down at the Howard Johnson's in a room that's impossibly little compared to some of the things that have gone on since then. But I put that show on, and Jim actually, because I was friends, by 84, you know, I had done a lot of things with the radio station, you know, the basement tapes, the John Lennon memorial shows, and a lot of things. And Jim sat up, had a table at that record show, and we got to talking because I was going to open a record store. And he told me that he had been thinking about opening a record store. So, you know, since we'd been doing everything else together musically, you know, as far as live music and stuff, we thought, well, instead of going to retail war, we'll just do it together.
That was a good solution.
Yeah, and we did, and it was successful. You know, it worked. But you know, about a year, you know, and I'll take the blame for that split up just because I'm an independent cuss, and you know, I was still going to do my own thing, and you
guys split up.
We split up, yeah. But you know, I never had a bad word to say about Jim Reeves ever, under any circumstances. In fact, now the last week I've been thinking I wish I would have let him just do his own thing, and maybe we'd have been buddies all that time. Anyway, regardless.
You're right.
Yeah, well, because I don't care about competition. It's never bothered me.
Well, your post on Facebook concerning Jim, who I guess we should mention tragically died.
He died
in a fire.
In the fire at Germantown Hills, yeah.
Your elicited, first of all, it was very eloquent, the things you wrote, and you kind of recited the history, but it elicited so many comments from people that knew him from the radio, knew him from being around here, having worked here. It was really quite moving.
Yeah, definitely, and through that, too, I got in contact with his daughter, Gretchen. And, in fact, she was at our record show on Sunday the 27th here in town, and I was able actually to give her a copy of each of the Basement Tapes albums.
That you still had, and which are pretty rare. There
were 500 of each press, so that's not very many. And anyway, we can talk about that a little more in detail, but maybe we'll just play the first song off of the first Basement Tapes album, and then I've got some things for you that actually include Jim himself.
Right. Let's hear it.
So this is Don Burbaum and Sally Weisenberg had a band at the time. It was called Uptown, and this is the first song from the 1981 106 Basement Tapes album by Uptown. It's called Real Sweet, and it definitely is real sweet. What a voice. I haven't seen them for a long time now.
I remember interviewing her for Prairie Sun.
Oh, yeah.
And of course, she's been active.
Oh, yes, it's real sweet. 'Cause I've been around, but I never found nobody to do me right. Then you came along, and now I'm singing your song. I'm loving you day and night, and every day now it's real sweet.
6 bags.
Yes, it's real sweet. He's the only one that makes me get up and run, makes me skip a beat.
The ones that I picked out are...
He makes me feel all of his real complete. He stole my heart right from the start, I guess I gotta say. But I let that be 'cause he never cheat, that just ain't his way. Oh yes, he's real sweet. I looked around, but I never found nobody to do me right. And you came along and now I'm singing your song. I'm loving you day and night, and let me tell you now it's real sweet. Oh yes, it's real sweet.
Call it a Revo.
Oh, God. Yeah. Where's Rich from?
I made her a vine, found a man made of mine, and he's real sweet. We got a little thing really makes me swing, and it's real sweet.
They came through here, or Gary
My
was.
friends see me round, hanging on the town, smiling to my beat. And I put it to Bible and just wanna shake that it's real sweet. Oh yes, it's real sweet.
All right. That's Uptown with Sally Weisenberg. And I always like the other members of the group were Dan Burbaum, Bill Sutton, Keith Birdman Smith, and Don Gardner.
Yeah, Don was he was a great drummer, and he's one of those guys that I lost track of. And when we were posting things on Facebook after Jim's passing, I found out that Don was also no longer with us, unfortunately.
Do you think this concept would work now? Is it? I mean, I'm assuming the talent's here. Obviously, we take a station to, there really isn't a WWCT type station anymore. We know that. I mean, things have changed in the radio business. We
Yeah,
can't
106 was a moment in time, but maybe not,
I mean, 99.9, at least in this market, is still the eclectic one
And Mike Ray was at 106,
at that time.
and John Simmons, who is also
who are now in charge of the present 99.
Yeah, well,
see.
maybe if we goon them strong enough,
I mean, would you see 10 acts that you could pull out of this area?
Oh, easy.
Easy, okay.
Yeah, there's a young generation of bands running around Peoria that, all of the bands represented on those Basement Tapes albums, if they wanted to work 6 nights a week without driving more than 50 miles, they could do so.
Really?
But today,
That's changed.
Where do they go?
Yeah, I was going to say that's changed.
They're creating their own gigs. They're playing in house basements and pizza works and putting on their own things. It's sort of like my band in the '60s. We created our own gigs. We'd find a Legion Hall somewhere and create a gig. And that's what's going on now. Except it's much more difficult for those bands.
Well, yeah, I guess that's the reality. You've got something now. This will be familiar to people who aren't necessarily knowledgeable about bands from the Peoria-area. The group was Suburban 9 to 5, and a fairly big name came out of that group. More than one, but certainly one.
Yeah, Gary Richrath was the guitarist in Suburban 9 to 5, and Scott Somerville, who's still in Peoria. He hasn't been in any bands that I'm aware of anyway.
Was he in
His brother Mike was in Head East.
Oh, okay, that's what I was thinking of, Head East.
Yep, and Dan Higgins played bass. Let's see.
You're
Just a walking encyclopedia of rock and roll
Rick
history.
Nelson and Bubby Skinner, but actually, I mean, it's terrible. I feel like Debbie Downer, speaking in terms of reality. But Gary and Dan and Bubby are gone. You know, and I discovered over the last couple of weeks in some of, you know, this, you know, working on basement tapes and some other subjects, that, you know, 3 of the Shags are gone, you know, and they were a huge band around here.
Well, you know, when people who remember those groups, they're forever young because you saw them when they were like in their 20s or
their
something.
Their pictures are there.
Yeah,
they're on the picture sleeve, and you can hear the boys singing.
Yeah, you know? But then you realize, oh, wait, it's 2019.
Yeah, it's 60 years later practically. But anyway, this recording was done when either Gary was back visiting or REO came through. I don't know exactly. It was 1980 when he visited 106. Down on Hamilton when they were up on the 2nd or 3rd floor, and Jim did this interview and played a Suburban 9 to 5 record.
Oh, during the interview?
Yeah, and Gary commented on it, and so I thought it would be fully appropriate to hear Jim Reeves,
the man himself,
interviewing Gary Richrath at the old 106. Hello, boys.
You remember? Oh, no. You remember this? We got to get this on. We're going to put this on the air.
Are you kidding? Great. No problem. Wait, can I have this when you play?
Well, I'll tell you what. I'll make a phone call and see what I can.
By the way, for all you people that don't know what we're talking about.
Wait, hold it up because there's a lot of people with color sets.
Yeah, I'll hold this up so you can see this. It's a blue label. No, it's a single of the first band that I was in when back when our band, it was Suburban 9 to 5, back when our band was in competition with Dan Fogelberg's band, who was, the coach. And
how about Yellowbird? Remember Yellowbird?
No.
No, that was the guy who's now Pork of the
of course I do, yeah.
Sure.
No, we
Function at the Junction?
Yeah, I actually do remember that. My memory is coming back. It's very foggy, but it is coming back.
Well, I'll tell you what we're going to do. We're going to play this this real old tune here. Now, who does the vocals and stuff?
Scott Somerville, who's probably around in some bands here.
Okay, well, let's get to it. Some old... When was this recorded?
I'm not going to tell you. Then everybody know how old I am.
Like 68, 69?
Nah, yeah, somewhere around
that. Okay, let's get to it.
Golden Voice Studios in South Pekin. WIRL played it.
Oh, did it?
It charted locally.
That's good. Well, you know, I don't think I've heard this in ages, but it sounds like, they play this, sure. Yeah.
It's a great record. The flip side of it's called Elevator Operator. It was written by Gene Clark of the Byrds.
Yeah. Did the Byrds do it?
Gene put it on his first solo album. Lots of garage bands gravitated towards that song, but Suburban actually recorded it.
When you first launched your record store, records were still in vogue, 84, or at CD? When did CDs come on?
CDs didn't really start taking over in a big way until the late 80s, but they've been around since 82.
Okay. I wonder what that transition was.
Yeah. It's a great record. I love it.
REO, did you ever hear them before Richrath joined them?
No, I didn't.
I'm thinking I did at Bradley. They were playing. I don't think Richrath was with them then, because it was probably in that. I don't know, when did he leave this? 69 or something?
69, yeah.
It might have been just before that.
Well, he was in another band in Peoria called The Alliance. before REO,
Oh, really?
maybe after Suburban.
So this is pretty short-lived, Suburban 9 to 5. Or do they go
I
on
wish
under?
Whale was still alive. We could call him up and find out.
That's another guy I remember. Well,
Hey, those are the hit sounds of Suburban 9 to 5.
Yeah, I just haven't heard that in a while.
That's
there
Jim
wasn't
Reeves.
Too much lead work on it then, because I didn't really know how to play guitar.
Yeah, nothing real Hendrix-esque
No,
or
I
anything.
was more leaning towards the arts.
I don't know the other CT DJ that was talking there. I'm not sure who the other guy was. But most of the interview was Jim.
and that was on the record.
That was on Basement Tapes 81. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
And for people who are wondering if they're coming in midway, I don't know if people come in midway on a podcast. I never know. I keep relating to radio, and it's not the same. But
Well, it's digital. They can back it up.
yeah. You might have not been paying attention for the first 15 minutes or so. But no, this is an actual record that came out with all local bands,
All area bands.
and promoted by the station.
Yeah.
because they would play. They would. I think. Well, didn't they have a? You would remember this better than I do, but didn't they have a time when they would play area bands on the air, or did they sprinkle them in?
If they had something they were going to play, going to use, they would just
play
put
it
it into.
Okay.
It's called rotation.
Oh, rotation. Okay, yeah.
And I think the first local record that I'm aware of that 106 had in rotation was the Mackinac album in 1979.
What do you say to an ex-Marine you can't do? What do you tell an ex-Marine you can't tell them nothing? Or you're talking about Crow Carols?
Yeah.
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 Yeah. No, that was I like that song. Now you had we're going to play something else, and you can set this up. But before we get distracted, or we've got all these things going on, you brought up something else on Facebook. Like a Rock and Roll Hall of Fame for Peoria or Greater Peoria or Central Illinois, whatever.
Yeah, well, I guess I would say, I have set a mission, if you will, or a goal of creating the Peoria and Central Illinois Music Hall of Fame.
You've had this for a while?
The whole thing came out of the tragedy of Jim Reeves.
Okay, so recent.
Yeah, when Jim passed, and people started throwing comment upon comment,
memories.
Yeah, and start talking about. That's why we're doing the basement tapes right now, is because you start thinking about things, and it occurred to me sort of in a whoosh. I've known about it for a long time, but we're losing people. Bob Miller, Jim Reeves, and all the guys in Suburban and the Shags and Dan Fogelberg, and just Richard Pryor. So much talent has come and gone.
Right.
That and also, my band from Iowa, Gone, is in the Iowa Hall of Fame, which it's called the Iowa Music Association Hall of Fame.
Where is that, in Des Moines?
No, it's up in Arnold's Park in the northwest corner. It's up by Clear Lake, where the Buddy Holly,
oh yeah,
that all took place. And I've been in an inductee up there since 2004, and I know that there are some other states that have similar things. And when the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame was in its infancy, before they had a building or even had hopes of getting a building, which is hard to believe now, but they did not. I went with Jim McCarty to take some Yardbirds memorabilia to their temporary site. They were renting space and accumulating.
This is in Cleveland.
Yeah. They were renting space and accumulating donations and collecting memorabilia and deciding what they were going to do, And So I've had a little bit of experience with this sort of organization, et cetera, and I just thought it's high time. It's probably beyond high time for something like this to take place.
Well, and the beauty of getting it out on social media or here on the show is other people can tag in and say, hey, how about this? How about that? Or,
Yeah, well, I'm
kind of move it along.
Well, I'm encouraging, people who have, at this point, and also I've had some conversations. This is the first time I've talked about this in any kind of a public way other than, what you see on Facebook.
Right. Which is pretty public.
It's pretty public, but, I don't get into the weeds.
Oh, yeah.
But what I intend to do would be to limit this to rock and roll, jazz, and blues, and radio venues, movers and shakers who made things happen, and directly involved in the popular music scene. So there won't be any classical performers, no Fibber.
Right away, you're getting people upset.
No,
you know that?
No Fibber McGee and Molly.
Okay, here we go. Cutting it back.
Well, yeah.
Wait, where does Pryor fit into that?
He wouldn't.
He wouldn't fit in? Oh,
Well,
boy.
No.
Missing one of your big drawing cards there, I would think.
Richard Pryor
Doesn't need it.
Doesn't need
All right.
Craig Moore
he's got statues.
to be out there promoting him.
I'm not saying that. I'm saying that when you have the Hall of Fame.
Yeah, but he's how many halls of fame does he need to be in?
Well, exactly. I suppose.
No, this is the Music Hall of Fame.
I'm just being the devil's advocate.
I know you are. You got to pick on me, especially since there's a camera going.
Well, let's play something. This is what you're all about, the music. So let's,
and there is such a wealth, and because I've had the conversation about well, Chicago. Oh my God, et cetera, et cetera. Well, Chicago doesn't need Peoria to give it any publicity either.
True.
I think Central Illinois
has its own personality, its wealth of talent, wealth of recorded history, live music history. It doesn't need to be buried under the influence of Chicago or St. Louis or anything or any of these huge venues. Yeah.
No. And so, if somebody thinks I'm all wet, they're welcome to pick up that ball and run with it. But I won't be involved in it. I think it needs to be focused on Peoria and Central Illinois. Doesn't mean that we couldn't come up with some means of tipping the hat to the Crying Shames, the Shadows of Night, bands like that who came through Peoria, and their influence is certainly felt on some of the bands that made records at Golden Voice in the day. And there's national bands like Head East who have a Peoria connection with Mike Somerville, but they're actually a Champaign band. And the Finchley Boys, who did an album that's highly collectible. So I don't rule out the bands that came through from other parts of the state because they were all part of this stew. And they're all entitled to acknowledgement. But I don't see the point in trying to do Chicago any favors. I just don't see the need.
Well, go ahead. What do you got next from the basement tape?
Well, having said that, I'm going to turn that on its ear completely because the next thing that I wanted to play from the Basement Tapes album is Greg Williams, who you certainly know, one of the preeminent guitar players to ever come out of here. And this recording he did with Jim Fares, who was one of the Crying Shames from Chicago.
Well, there you go. It all intertwines.
So, you see, I'm wide open to the possibilities. But this is a song that Greg and Jim Fares recorded at Golden Voice with another musician named Steve Mergen. And this is... I've forgotten the year. Greg has filled me in on this, and I can't You've got me distracted now. I can't remember anything.
It's all right. We'll just listen to the record.
Yeah, so this is Greg Williams. It's his song. He wrote it and sings it, and it's called Smiling Sweet Memory, and it's from Basement Tapes 81.
California, you're a long way apart. Country boy, let me warn you, you'll tear up your heart when your friends all go home and you're left on your own. She'll be a smiling, sweet memory away. Telephone, unaccustomed to long distance love. Now I've grown
You've been in the business, but
so accustomed to not enough of LA stars fade away. Ocean
There's I'd have to really think about it for Peoria, but they're all over the area. Like if you go over to Decatur, you've got Ron Stockard, who went on with Rufus, Three Dog Night.
oh, really?
And Pork Armstrong, Pork and Havana Ducks. Those guys were both in a band called the Light Brigade.
I think I remember interviewing Pork and the Havana Ducks at Last Chance, or Second Chance.
Second Chance.
Second Chance,
yeah.
excuse me. When it was kind of a venue for a play. That was a good place.
Oh, it's a great
Oh,
place.
yeah.
Outside of Park West, I think it was the coolest music venue in the whole state in its day.
Yeah, because it seemed like, wow, we've got this right here in Peoria, you know. It was,
Oh, another guitar player who was also in that same band with Pork and Stockard. His name was Steve Hunter. And he went on, he played with Lou Reed and Alice Cooper. And,
really? Some people don't know that. That's good. That'd be good.
you know, and these are the people who actually made something of themselves that I think people should know a little more about.
Well, you know, it also cries out for, along with I guess we can all be on Facebook, but an article, that would recount, maybe more of a, showing the groups and the spin-offs. You could do kind of a graphic thing with it.
Yeah, family tree.
Yeah, family tree type thing, yeah.
Yeah. So that was Greg Williams with Jim Fares from the Crying Shames.
Mm-hmm. What's your favorite Crying Shame song?
Oh, dear. Dennis Dupree from Danville. Or maybe, I don't know, I like a lot of them. Mr. Unreliable was pretty cool. They were a great band. I've always sort of heard the Crying Shames all over the Shags records.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
Okay.
And the Shags did 2 records, but they had that same sort of vocal thing.
Now, are you getting to this one?
I was gonna. Are we running out of time?
No. We got time.
Okay. I was gonna play this one.
Go ahead. Yeah, let's do that.
So, when the Basement Tapes 81 was just about to be announced, they were going to announce the bands that were going to be on the record and who was going to be playing at their second chance when they did their show, live show. Mm-hmm. And the station, they didn't know, because I submitted my song anonymously. I came up with a fake name and submitted it just to see what would happen.
You're a troublemaker, even then.
Even then.
Yeah.
So I knew that it was all over but the shouting. They just hadn't made the announcements yet. So I gave Jim Reeves called him up, or he called me about something to do with probably the logistics of the live show or something.
Mm-hmm.
And he said he was curious as to what the song was that I had submitted. I gave him a clue. I told him, well, here you go. When natural enemies get together to make music, what's the name of the first baseman? And he said, okay. And about 10 minutes later, he called me back. Might not even have been 10 minutes, because all he had to do really was go down the list of people and find something. And he called back and he said, Wolf and the Snakes. I said, yep. And he said, that's on the album. I said, ah!
Your cover is blown.
Yeah, well, so...
But it wasn't. You didn't reveal yourself.
I didn't reveal myself at all until it was all over with.
Okay.
And then, that just killed me, because that was the only advance warning I got on any of that, was that I knew just before they made the announcements was that song was going to be part of it. Well, then later, when they got to doing the album, they compiled this book of history that Mike Foster and Bob Miller, for the most part, put together on all these old the bands from the 60s, the Suburban, the Shags, the Alliance, all of these bands, and the history of the music scene here. And they called the book Who's Who, the Gilded Book of Who's Who. And that just tickled me to death, because the song that I had submitted gave them a format for the book they wanted to do.
I see. Who's Who, yeah.
Yep, and I had nothing to do with it, I swear. Nothing at all. I found out about it just like everybody else did. And this is the song that I submitted, and it's on the 81 Basement tapes. It's called Who's Who.
You can see them at the party with their heads held high. It's rough sometimes if you are usually
Is this the whole band?
It's Greg Williams on guitar, Mark Moretto on drums, me, and Rich Mitz is doing some harmony vocals. Recorded over at GDS in Morton.
It has a pure Prairie League feel to it.
Okay. That's good.
Yeah, it's very good.
I mentioned WLS and WIRL in there.
With the stations of record, literally,
Yes.
in Peoria.
In Peoria, absolutely.
Yep. You could get CFL sometimes. I mean, reception was iffy, but that's another Chicago station.
Yeah.
The Voice of Labor. Remember that?
Is that what that was?
Yeah, Voice of Labor. Yeah. Well, and what was LS was largest store, world's largest store, Sears.
Oh.
Yeah, that was WLS.
Wow. Yep. They were the Prairie Home Companion radio station before that.
Yep. Yeah, well, they played the barn dance thing.
Yeah.
Yep.
1960, they just completely went top 40.
Yep. Which was kind of the PEO thing here. PEO went from top 40 to religion.
Yeah, yeah.
Boom. In about that time. And left the field open to IRL.
I grew up in Keokuk, Iowa. I didn't get WIRL, but I got LS and KXOK.
Oh, yeah.
And boy, the
Little Rock?
It was St. Louis.
What's the one out of Little Rock?
KAAY.
Okay. That was the classic, the late night thing.
Yeah, late night Beaker Street.
Beaker Street, yeah. That's still, you can still pick that up. I mean, beats.
I don't think the DJs are doing acid anymore, though.
No, probably not.
That was a really freaky radio station.
Yeah, because it had the longest pauses of any station. You'd hear the chimes, the wind chimes in the background, and it'd be like, somebody talk, and then voice would finally come in. Yeah, that was Hendrix. Really?
It was cool.
Like, wow, man. And that went all over the Midwest.
Something tells me you might have been up listening about 3 in the morning, huh?
You'd be like, what's this? It'd be like, you find it by accident.
So that was 81 basement tapes.
That was a few years ago for you.
Yeah,
but it sounded good. It has a nice sound. Now, did you make any others? Was that a one-shot deal, or did you record a bunch of songs, or?
Oh yeah, I've got a lot of stuff recorded.
By Wolf and the Snake?
No, just that one song.
That was one. That was for the competition.
Yeah,
okay.
And I didn't attempt to do that anymore, but I just tried it just to see if the song would make it on its own.
It's funny. I guess this is what history is all about. But when you think back and you're bringing it back with Craig's, we're reviewing 1981 basement tapes by a local radio station here. And what you said so far is you had a radio station that was willing to promote local bands. The local bands could perform freely in the area and make money, or I don't know how much money, but they would at least be busy. Mm-hmm. You had the opportunity to have a big, beautiful place, like a second chance to play in, relatively new at the time. And we took it all for granted. It was just like, yeah, that's what it is.
Yeah.
But it's like everything else. It's a phase, things change. And not that it's terrible now. We're a lot older, but I mean, it's
a lot more difficult for a band to play. Because venues.
Well, you don't have the radio system anymore.
No,
Top 40.
Venues are not really paying bands to come in, you used to have the Coliseum, the Emporium, Heckle and Jekyll's, O'Leary's Cow, on and on and on and on, all through the 70s and the 80s, early 80s anyway. And they had a regular band schedule, and they hired bands. They actually hired bands. And if your band got popular and people followed the band around, you could expect to play for a decent audience, any night of the week. It was a scene that if the local bands today had that same opportunity, they would just be beside themselves. But the one big difference today is all the local bands are writing and playing only their own stuff, which is something that I wish I had the nerve to do back in the day, except maybe we wouldn't have had people following us around from club to club.
Yeah, because you mentioned that, and we were talking about Suburban 9 to 5, which featured Gary Richrath, and I was telling you that triggered a memory of REO before Richrath, and they were playing at Bradley while I was there, and I would hear it reverberating around the student center at the time, and they were playing Sympathy for the Devil, the Stones song.
Yeah.
But that wasn't, I don't know they ever recorded that. They just played it, in live things, which...
Well, REO started out, they were just a cover band like everybody else, I don't know how much original material the band had before Gary joined the band. I don't know. I actually went into the Irving Azoff, that name.
Helped Mr. Fogelberg.
He manages Joe Walsh and the Eagles, and I don't know.
He has a little bit of money, I think. I've heard.
I don't think you have to worry about his checkbook.
No.
But my band I was in Keokuk, we heard about this place called Blytham Entertainment. This would have been '69. And we'd just got in the truck and drove to Champaign with the idea we were going to audition for Blytham, because we'd never had a booking agent before, didn't know what that was really, and showed up at Blytham. And John Barrick and Bob Nutt and Irving Azoff were in this little upstairs office, and they called, John Barrick called the Chances Are. The second chance was literally the second Chances Are. The people who own Chances Are in Champaign did that. And he called this club, and he said, well, this band showed up from Iowa wanting to audition, and I'm wondering if we can bring them down there and let them play for like a half an hour. This was during the day. And they said yes. So we went down and set up and auditioned for John Barrick, Bob Nutt, and Irving Azoff. And we went back and had a meeting, and Irving says, well, I think the bass player that's singing, I might be able to use him. I might be able to do something with him in the studio. But the band, it's just another band, and they sort of blew the band off. But Irving wanted me to come back over and go in the studio. He wanted to see what I sounded like on tape. The band told me, you got to go do that. Go ahead, do that. So I did. I drove back over, and I got together with some guys, back porch majority or back street majority, guitar player, real good guitar player, and a drummer. Just the three of us in a studio in Champaign, and I recorded some stuff with those guys. Irving Azoff in charge. And he liked it. He liked what he was hearing. And then he signed REO to Epic and was gone.
Is that right?
He was gone. He moved to L.A. Him and John Barrick took off and moved to L.A. He came back and got Fogelberg, like the following year he had Fogelberg out there. So, yes, I have the distinction of Irving Azoff.
You were left to the altar?
I was left at the altar.
That's so sad.
Irving Azoff broke up my band. He could have made a lot of money with me.
Well, don't you think, though, we got time for one more, so
Okay.
you pick that. But before we do that, don't you think there's a lot of luck goes into who becomes famous and who doesn't? I mean, obviously you need talent, and you need contacts.
I'm not sure how much luck there was involved with Dan Fogelberg being successful, or REO Speedwagon for that matter. Once Gary wrote "Riding the Storm Out."
Okay, but once you get the right manager.
Well, and that was Irving and John Barrick. That was just one of those things, because they'd probably been trying to sell other bands previously. I'm sure they got to Epic because they had tried something before. But he pulled it off. He got REO a deal without Riding the Storm Out or any of the things that later became massive.
Yeah. Oh, I always liked their first album, the one with the car.
That's
the
bus,
or whatever it is.
I'm not sure if that one was recorded at Golden Voice, but Fogelberg's was.
Okay.
And Styx. The Golden Voice was real important as far as any of the bands around here that wanted to do their own stuff.
And it burned down, right?
It burned down, yeah. So this is from the 1982 Basement Tapes album.
Oh, how long did it go? When did they
just
stop?
Those 2 years.
2 years, okay.
They did a CD Basement Tapes album project in 1990, but I don't know anything about it. I didn't have anything to do with it. But this is from another recording that Jim did. He did an interview with Tom Kane from the Coachman. And this record represents Dan Fogelberg's first record and the first two songs he ever recorded and released. So, and this is Dan with the Coachman and Jim Reeves interviewing Tom Kane about the song Maybe Time Will Let Me Forget on 106.
I'm with Tom Kane, a member of the band The Coachman and the New Coachman from the 60s. What was it like to be a part of a rock and roll band in Peoria in the late 60s?
Back in that time, I guess we were kind of the pioneers of rock and roll back in that era. It was really quite a trip. It was a good time for everybody, and we had a sense of unity amongst the guys in the bands too. Kind of like a football team would have, with each other.
Was Dan Fogelberg the group leader of the Coachman?
We really didn't have a leader. As a matter of fact, just to show you how tight our group was, Dan came into the band just 2 or 3 days before we were going to do a concert with a group of Crying Shames that were coming down from Chicago, and we all clicked real well together. None of us, I guess, would really be considered a leader. We were just all kind of mutually in the thing together and really had a good time doing it.
The Coachman recorded a few original songs at Golden Voice Studios. What was that like?
It was really wild. You have to understand, here's a group of mid-year high school students, and this is all really kind of new to us, and we've all got aspirations of being superstars. And we go into this recording studio in Pekin, and it's this humongous building, and the ceiling must have been about 30 feet high, and we were all just kind of awed with the whole thing. And they put the headphones on us and the mics, and we're testing our instruments for audibility and things like that. And it was really a wild trip. It was kind of an ego trip for all of us.
Here's a tune that was recorded by the Coachman in 1967 at Golden Voice Studios. It was written by Dan Fogelberg, and it's called Maybe Time Will Let Me Forget.
I just had a meeting with Tom the other day.
Who's being interviewed there?
Yeah.
What's he doing now?
He's retired from Caterpillar.
The whole career has gone by since that. He was a young man.
Yeah.
Winter's gone.
So he didn't play.
No, he
music?
said, no, I guess he dropped out of the music scene in '69.
Leaving now.
Never was in another band.
And that's probably true of others, you know.
Yeah, more than likely.
Maybe time will let me forget. Maybe time will let me forget. Maybe time will let
But they were the Coachmen prior to Dan joining the band. They were famous for wearing these sort of New Colony 6, Paul Revere and the Raiders kind of outfits. There's pictures on the on the website.
Probably what you say. Probably don't like people see anymore.
He doesn't think that one of those suits exists anymore. But and they had
for your Hall of Fame, you know that.
They had knee-high boots. I mean, they had some cool stuff.
Really?
Yeah, but I'm hoping that we can recreate it if we.
Well, you know, Steve Spann, the costume trumpet, can probably hook you up there.
Well, we need to. Tom thinks that one of the jackets might actually exist. One of the guys may actually have one of the jackets. And that's a big part of it. We can probably fake the boots. And the pants they were just white, you know. Not sure. First, we have to have a place to put it, though, Stevie.
You know, Bob Seger was here recently on his farewell tour. I didn't see it, but others here did. And we were recalling, I think Phil Luciano wrote a column about when he packed Brad at the Fieldhouse. But I said that wasn't the first time he played at the Fieldhouse. He played there in the foyer.
He played in the hallway.
In the hallway.
Yeah.
And I remember what he wore at the time, blue jeans and a white T-shirt.
Oh, you were there for that?
Yeah, I was there for that one. Well, it was free. Yeah, I was there for that one.
Was there a Rambling game that night or something?
No. Rambling Gambling Man down on the radio.
Yeah.
He played it twice. When he started and when he finished.
Yeah.
But he didn't dress up. No, Bob Seger was not a dress up.
It was a garage band.
Oh, yeah.
The Rambling Gambling Man, a huge record.
Oh, yeah. Yeah. That's the earliest
Maybe
recording.
Time Will Let Me Forget, and the flip side of that song that were released on a single. They were both recorded at Golden Voice Studios. How many did they sell?
I have no idea. I think they only printed like 50 original copies of the record. And
That's not right.
I sold a few to my parents, and each of the other members
so
did
we
too. And
sold
that was about
50.
the extent of it. I don't think it really fared too well at the time.
Reflect on the Coachmen in retrospect, if you will, the impact they perhaps had on Central Illinois rock and roll in general.
I think that every
WRL
band at that particular point in time would like to think that they were the #1 band in the area. The Coachmen, we were certainly proud of the type of music we were playing. We felt as though we were well received, and kind of like to think of ourselves, I guess, as the pioneers of rock and roll in this area. And we just decided it was a good time to split up because we really weren't heading in the same direction. So Robin and I joined with Gary Richrath and Scott Somerville, who were then with Suburban 9 to 5, and we just adopted their name, Suburban 9 to 5, and continued to play for several months before we all ended playing together.
So you helped to shut down the Coachmen and Suburban 9 to 5.
Yeah, I never really looked at it that way before. I'm starting to feel bad about that.
Probably forgot about it.
Well, all good things have to come to an end at one time or another.
Well, that's a good way to finish it. All good things have to come to an end.
Yeah.
See? And that's true of our podcast, too.
Tom told me that they played with the Dave Clark Five.
Oh.
And, you know, I don't know too many people who saw the
When they came here?
They played the LaSalle Teen Center.
LaSalle Teen Center?
Yeah, to about 100 kids.
Wow.
In 1966.
Oh, my goodness.
Yeah, they played with a lot of people. The Coachmen were on a lot of shows.
Dave Clark, by the way, did one of the best interviews I can remember on the old Larry King radio show.
Really?
Yeah, because he's got the British voice, of course, but he was very, I guess, successful as a producer and made money after the band broke up. But Dave Clark, if you ever hear that, I'm sure it's out there somewhere, because he knows the Beatles and he can talk about all the history just like you can with this area, you know. So Rock history is fascinating.
Well, you just compared me to Dave Clark, and I think that's pretty cool. I'll take it.
Without the accent.
I don't quite think that's true, though. But I'll take it.
Well, you did hang around with Jim McCarty there, so he had a little bit of that voice.
Yeah.
The former Yardbird guy.
Yes.
Well, Craig, we got to wrap it up here. You're going to carry on with this crusade for the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame in Peoria, or however you're going to call it.
Well, it's Peoria and Central Illinois Music Hall of Fame.
Okay.
So I don't really want to limit it to rock and roll, but I want to limit it to Peoria and Central Illinois.
When is your first committee meeting to work on this?
Well, I'm forming the committee.
You're forming the committee. Well,
yeah.
That's what we'll just tell people to head over to your store. and they can badger you there as to why you're not allowing this person in or that person out, and carry on that way.
I think I've gotten a lot of good response, and the music scene in Peoria, especially the vintage music scene, shall we say, prior to the modern times. Going back from the 50s until the present day. Everybody I've talked to have been very supportive of the concept, the idea, and having this happen.
The fascinating thing to me, and this is just a thought that maybe somebody out there could say you should go to Austin, Texas, where they have this or whatever, but a museum, an auditory museum, is a real challenge because, do you play one thing over here, one thing there? Is it played on headphones so people go from one thing to another? I mean, is it sort of selective, or is it group? I think there's some things there that need to be worked out.
Well, I've been saying since the beginning of this concept is that first things first, and the first thing is it has to exist in some form. And it can grow from that,
Yeah.
You get together people who are willing to devote time and energy to putting together what needs to be there to actually call it, a Hall of Fame.
Well, and money is somewhere in there.
Well, money's somewhere in there, a physical location, place, because if it's just going to be on Facebook, then I'm not really interested in it.
Well, I mean, you've got other things for that. Well, let's hear more on that. And in the meantime, Craig Moore, record Wolf and the Snakes man,
leader of Wolf and the Snakes,
leader of Wolf and the Snakes, and Hervé Zoff's greatest fan.
Oh yeah.
Well, thank you so much, and I want to thank Matt Dayhoff.
Yeah, thanks, Matt.
Gets this out, our little basement tape.
Yeah,
that we do every now and then.
The technology.
Oh yeah, you got. I think it's 80s technology. I'm not sure.
Okay.
I wouldn't know, but anyway.
Thanks for the invitation, by the way.
Yeah, you're always welcome. You know that. This is Steve Tarter. Hey, we'll see you next time on Tartar Sauce.